Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another weekly edition of the All Aboard newsletter. Today, we are going to be talking about a topic that I have spent a lot of time thinking about, and that is how to use an assistant or a virtual assistant in this case to give you more time, more leverage, and more capacity back to your own life personally and in your business. And so, a lot of times questions come up as like, what does a VA do for you? And if you're an independent agent, it's wide open. There are so many things that a virtual assistant can do for you from out of the country at a much lower wage. If you are a captive agent, you might be a little bit more restricted, but there are still a ton of things it can help you with. And what I usually tell people is the more you work with a virtual assistant, the more ideas and things that you realize they can help you with. So, with that, we are going to dive in to the topic of how to use a VA in your agency. Let's do it. All right, so here we are. The topic of the week is how to use a virtual assistant in your agency. And the subtitle is like, are you ready to let go? And I think that's really one of the biggest challenges we all have with an assistant or a virtual assistant of any kind is that we don't want to let go of the things. And so let's talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about maybe why people struggle to use virtual assistants, some ways that I use a virtual assistant, and then some thoughts and concerns before you go ahead and get started. So, you know, this is kind of like our typical operating mode as an entrepreneur, right? There's always like so many fires going on. And I think a lot of us have just gotten so used to dealing with those fires all the time, but it doesn't have to be this way. We can have help. We can hire people to work with us on the various types of things that we either don't want to do, on things that we don't like to do, or on things that we just don't have the time or capacity to do, or even more importantly, we shouldn't be doing because we should be spending our time on higher value tasks. So, what are some of the challenges that people have with virtual assistants? Well, for one, training your virtual assistant is just like one more thing to do. And I hear you, right? Like, I've heard so many arguments about this where people say, man, like, if I go hire a virtual assistant, well, it's going to take me so much time to train them. And the answer is like, yeah, like it is, but you have to look at it like an investment. Like the time that you're spending is not a cost; it's an investment if you're doing it the right way. And if you're doing it the right way, what that looks like is that you're making videos teaching somebody how to do it. And now you're not just creating a knowledge base for this one virtual assistant, you're creating a knowledge base for everybody. You're making a leverage play. You do it one time and you train 10, 20, 30, 40 times. And so, yes, it is one more thing to do. But would you rather spend 20 minutes a day for the next 4 years or spend, 40 to 60 minutes today training somebody so you never have to do that again? Okay. So that's kind of like my thought process. I went through this yesterday when I was making some videos for Next Call Club. I basically said, man, like I just spent 45 minutes doing this. Like, ugh. But you know what? Now I'm not going to have to spend 10 to 15 minutes, multiple times per week to do that same thing. So it's an investment in your time. Second, you must be ready to delegate. If you are not ready to delegate, do not hire a virtual assistant. It's going to fail, right? And when I say you must be ready to delegate, you've got to be willing to let things go. And what I did before I hired a virtual assistant was I had a big list of all these things I was like, aren't worth my time, or I don't like doing, or honestly, I think somebody else should do, but I can't give it to somebody else because that person doesn't exist. Okay. So the third one is process, process, process. I've worked with my VA now for 6 or 7 months. Like, yeah, when we first got started, there was like communication issues and there were, mistakes that were made. Usually it was my fault because I wasn't giving good direction. So we had to create a process. We had to create a process around how to handle a calendar. We had to create a process around how to manage email. We had to create a process of like what to do and when. And then one of the other things we've talked about is like when I train you to do something, right? I want you to make a QRG or a quick reference guide on how to do that in the future. So I'll make a video, you make a quick reference guide, and then we go from there. And this is kind of this idea of like this short-term versus long-term mindset. It's like if you have a long-term mindset, you're thinking about investing versus I'm spending my time. No, you're investing your time to save so much time, energy, and stress later. Okay. So one of the things just to talk about here is the security and system concerns. I think those are valid, right? Like some people say, well, do you feel comfortable giving them access to your systems? Well, I think there's controls that you can put in place, right? You don't have to give them access to everything. They can still help you with a lot. A lot of software that you have can restrict permissions to where you can choose what that person sees. I've had people ask me like, well, do you give them like your credit card? Well, You know what? Like, yeah, like we do. But if you're worried about them running up a bill, like the first thing I would say to you is like, these are professionals. They just happen to be in another country, right? So these aren't random like swindlers off the streets. These are just people who live in another country. So I think that's the first thing. These are professional people. Second, if you do have the concerns, you can always get like a virtual credit card that has a limit on it. And third, if this is a really big concern for you, work with a virtual assistant firm that has, insurance and a bond and all of these different types of things. Because at the end of the day, if that employee runs off with a bunch of information or whatever, who are you going to hold accountable? Well, the VA firm that found them for you. Okay. So these are just some things to think about. So how do I use a virtual assistant? This is a question I get asked all the time. And you know what? I got asked so many times, I figured I'd finally write it down. And then when I wrote it down, I said, why don't I make a newsletter topic about this? And so, ultimately, I use a virtual assistant to put more time back in my day. So I think what I would say is like, I actually struggle with removing things from my plate. It's hard for me. I am much more likely to say, wow, I should do this, but I don't have the time. Let me give it to Mariana, my assistant. But what I would say is that is like I need to do better on saying like what's on my plate that I shouldn't be doing, that I should be giving up, and I'm working on that, right? So think about it in two ways. What can you take off your plate and give to somebody else so you can spend more time doing what you want to do? And what are the things that like you want to do but really aren't worth your time or you don't have time for that you can have somebody else do for you? And so I'll walk through those, okay? So the first one is building a social media presence. And so I've been on social media now for 2 or 3 years, I think maybe 2 years. And when I first got started, I started on LinkedIn and I did it all myself. And I really, really enjoyed it. I was meeting a lot of people. I was posting. I was practicing writing every day in a long form post. And that was great for me. But when I moved over to Facebook, it felt like I had to do it all again. And so I got a little bit of help. And the content that I put out is still from me, but building the network and building the audience is not always, I should say, right? And so how do we do this, right? So there's something called the fives strategy, okay? And this is something that we actually do on LinkedIn more, and Facebook's usually more me. LinkedIn is a little bit different, right? So here's kind of the five strategy. What it means that you say you add 5 people as a connection or a friend, okay? That's the first 5. The second one is you put 5 comments on a post, right? Because one of the best ways to build a following is to comment your thoughts on somebody else's post. The next 5 is 5 comments in groups. It gives you a lot of exposure to people that you might not otherwise. 5 direct messages, so reach out to 5 people. Usually for me, that's somebody who's added me as a friend or I've added them. And it's just, hey, thank you so much for connecting. And if you ever need anything, let me know, right? Anything that's like in more depth than that, I'm doing myself because I don't want to lose that personal touch. But like the quick welcome message or thank you for accepting my connection, of course, right? A computer could do it, but it doesn't need to be that way. And then the last 5 is 5 endorsements on LinkedIn. So if you're on Facebook, it's 4 5s. If you're on LinkedIn, it's 5 5s. Okay. But it helps a ton. And if you do the 5 strategy every day, you're going to build a following. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to go network with other agents. It doesn't matter if you're trying to network with your community. Like you pick your audience and you go for it. Okay. Another one is the $2 strategy. This is where you leave your 2 cents on 99 posts a day. It's kind of extreme. Gary Vee came up with this, but he says, if you leave your 2 cents on 99 posts, well, you're going to build a big following, right? A VA can help you with this. And it doesn't have to always be like super crazy or in depth, right? Like the key here is like teaching them what would you say or how would you say it. And in some cases, like I don't do this, but in some cases, you could literally just take all of your social media posts, all of your comments, everything you've written, put it in a GPT, and then be like, GPT, how would you respond to this in my voice, right? So I don't run the $2 strategy. I do run the 5 strategy, mostly for adding people and messaging people like welcome, kind of messages, thanks for connecting. But these are just some ideas that you could take, right? There's also the Facebook group strategy. This is one I know some agents have a lot of success with this. When they go out, they join a ton of community groups and they kind of become like the go-to insurance expert in that group. And it's driving a ton of referrals for them. A VA can help you with this, right? So think about all the ways that they can help you with social media. Like they can answer, they can be like, hey, you have all these messages you got to respond to. Or they can say, hey, you got this message. And you say, look, say this, right? I don't have time to sit in my Facebook Messenger inbox all day, but my admin will say, hey, this person messaged you. And I'll be like, hey, here's the response. Can you put it in for me? And they say, no problem. Okay. So it's just leverage. It just allows me to be more active on social media than I would be able to normally because I don't have to go look for it. It's just put right back in front of me. Next is research. Like this is a huge one. Research can take forever. And if you love research, well then fine, do the research. But sometimes it's as simple as saying like, hey, I need caller ID branding. Can you go find me 5 to 10 companies that offer this and give me some notes about them? And if there's any pricing on their website, right, can I help you kind of like curate and save you that initial time? Or I might say, hey, can you go out and do some research on like, what's the pay range? What's the pay band? Just like basic things that you might spend 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there, and they aggregate it for you. So you just have like an executive summary. You spend 2 minutes reading it and you can make a decision. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot of time, but 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 20 times a day, it's hours a day, tens of hundreds of hours per month. Okay. So keep that in mind. Third is anything tedious or manual. Like the amount of stuff I get done that's tedious or manual after hiring a VA is crazy, right? Like, and sometimes they're just using ChatGPT, which is like totally fine by me. I just don't want to have the effort and the thought process to go do it, right? Decision fatigue is a real thing. Having to figure out all these things is exhausting. And I wanted my energy to be spent on high value tasks. So like data entry on a CRM, right? Like sometimes we have stuff like where something got missed and we need to go update a bunch of stuff manually. A VA can help with that. Or we say, hey, I need you to go find the email addresses of all these people and they're scattered in all of our inboxes. We can get them all in one place on a list so we can send out an email and communicate on what we need to communicate. It's like sometimes I have to do that for Next Call Club and we don't have all the emails in one place all of the time. So we got to go fix that, right? Another one is reporting or Excel work. The amount of Excel work that can be done by a VA is nearly endless, right? So they need to know how to do Excel. Some virtual assistants already know how to do this, right? They have the Excel skills. Sometimes you got to teach them a little bit, but like think about how much like work that you do in Excel and how long it takes. And if somebody could do that for you, even better. Okay. Call routing. This is one that we use in our agency. Is like we have a virtual assistant. They're not licensed. They don't talk about coverage. They take every one of our inbound calls, stall, and get it to one of our sales reps, right? And it's basically just like a receptionist, for lack of a better term. But like we figured out we were sending out mail, we were driving in calls, we were doing all types of things, and we were missing the calls. And we're like, oh my God. So like we have a person who literally is there to make sure the phone gets picked up, and we're not spending a ton of money to do it. Okay. So this one is probably my personal favorite. It's like personal chores, right? Like personal chores, like you don't have to only use a VA for work, right? So like people say like what? And I say like Instacart. Like I've had people be like, hey, order my groceries before, right? And it's like, here's the list, or hey, like I went in and basically like said, hey, these are the things I need. And one of the best ways to do this is to take this bad boy out, send a voice note, walk around the pantry. I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this. Get it for me on Instacart, deliver it later, okay? It's amazing. Like once you do it once, you're like, holy crap, that's awesome, right? Another one is like return prep. Like if you're like me, man, you've got Amazon at your house like every single day, and a lot of stuff goes back to the store. So getting into the Amazon, getting the QR code, sending it over so it's all in one place. Again, that's all just like that tedious little stuff. That's a pain, right? Travel planning. Hey, find me some flight options, some hotel options. This is the price range, and just curate for me, okay? And then last, like I have a money pit of a house, right? Like my house always has things breaking. If you know me and you've talked to me, I've probably told you about one of the disastrous things that's happened in my house. So I have workers at my house a lot, and getting bids is a pain in the ass. So I'll be like, hey, can you find me 3 or 4 people to come out and give estimates? Saves so much time, saves my wife and I arguments. It's really honestly worth every penny. So let's wrap this up. Okay. So people always ask me like, who do I use for a VA firm? There's a bunch of them out there. I use Virtual Latinos. We found them because we were working with people in the Philippines, and, like most of my staff speak Spanish. And so I said, why don't we try some South America or Mexico, somewhere in like Latin America? And we found Virtual Latinos, and they have been great. And honestly, I've referred a bunch of people over to them, so much that they gave me a referral code. So if you want to talk to them, let me know. I can refer you, give you a code. We each get $150 credit on our bill. So let me know, and we can go from there. But here's some recommendations and thoughts if you are going to use a VA, okay? Number 1, have a plan going in. I told you before that I had a whole list of things to do before I hired my VA, and then I didn't have to think of it as we went. I immediately had 15, 20 things to train them on and start handing off. Okay. Second is like, look in the mirror. If it is not working, it is probably you. It is probably not your assistant. Again, a lot of times these are college educated professionals, very smart, very motivated. And if it's not working, it's probably you doing a poor job of giving them tasks, giving them directions, or delegating properly. Okay. Third is just treat them like any other employee, right? They're just an employee who lives in another country, right? I had people who worked for me move to other countries, like my analyst moved back to India, right? We didn't miss a beat. We were fully remote. The only thing that's changed is the schedule, right? Treat them like any other employee, develop them, invest in them, right? Train them, like give them more responsibilities and backfill those tedious tasks. Because if you train somebody who can do something amazing, like why don't we play to their strengths? Like my admin does a lot of my personal things, but she is amazing at graphic design. And so now the whole team is having her do graphic design to help with training and to share concepts, right? And so like, as she keeps learning and growing, I say, what do you want to learn? What do you want to get better at? And as she skills up, I'll find somebody to backfill her at some point to do these things that, now are too valuable for her to do. Okay. So treat them like any other employee. Fourth is pick a firm you trust. For me, that's Virtual Latinos, right? But again, I talked about that, like insurance, bonds, etc. And then always operate by this creed. Okay, I don't. Maybe creed's not the right word. Whatever. If it's manual, if it is a manual process, the first question is, can I automate it? Can I automate it with like an API or Zapier? And for some of you, that might be like sound like another language, right? But Zapier is a webhook. It just connects this thing to this thing and makes things happen, right? It's not overly crazy hard. If you cannot automate it, can you delegate it to somebody who has a lower hourly rate than you? And if so, do it. Okay. So I could not recommend having a virtual assistant enough. I have one. It is my goal that every manager or leader on my team has their own at some point, right? Because if I can take 20 hours or 30 hours a month off of their plate and give that back so they can work on higher value work, imagine how much more we could accomplish. Imagine how much more we could do. Okay. So that is the topic of the week, how to use a VA. Would love to talk to you about this. If you have ideas on different things that you use a VA for, I'm always looking for ideas. We can share together. Maybe I'll start a Facebook group post. So anyways, until next week, thanks so much. Bye.